Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the February 10th Washington Metro Board activities. I'm Matt Letourneau, Chairman of the Finance and Capital Committee. Before we begin, I'll turn the floor over to Teresa Impastato, our Chief Safety Officer, for this morning's safety contact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. February is American Heart Month, a time when everyone can focus on their cardiovascular health. One of the leading risk factors for cardiovascular disease is hypertension, or high blood pressure. Hypertension also puts you at risk for more serious complications from illnesses like COVID-19. Nearly 1 in 2 Americans has hypertension, but only 1 in 4 is likely to have the condition under control. This month, take charge of your blood pressure. A healthier heart can lead to a healthier life. Schedule an exam with your doctor to evaluate your blood pressure and develop a plan to address any identified hypertension or prevent it in the future. This concludes our February safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. Since this is our first meeting of the day, I will ask the Board Corporate Secretary to call the roll.
Chair Letourneau.
Present.
Vice Chair Babers.
Present.
Secretary Ports.
Present.
Ms. Klein.
Present.
Mr. Smedberg.
Present.
Dr. Lowe.
Present.
Mr. Drummer.
Present.
And Ms. Martin Proctor.
Good morning.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our January 13th meeting before us for approval. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll also consider the minutes approved as presented. We have 2 items on our agenda this morning. Before we get to those agenda items, I'd just like to take a moment to thank everybody that attended, either virtually or online, the 3 public hearings that we held on Metro's proposed FY23 budget earlier in the week. Metro is still taking testimony until 5 p.m. on Tuesday, February 15th. For more information and to submit testimony, visit www.wamata.com/budget. I hope everybody will take advantage of these opportunities to weigh in. As far as this morning's agenda is concerned, the first item, it's an important one. It's a work session and discussion of Metro's proposed FY 2023 capital budget and 5-year capital improvement program. We'll also get an overview of the progress that's been made on addressing our maintenance backlog and our state of good repair needs, which have helped significantly by the regional dedicated capital funding that was approved in 2018. Next, the committee will discuss the issue of fare evasion, including current and historical estimates of the rate of fare evasion on Metro Rail and Metro Bus. This was a report that went to the board regularly prior to the pandemic that is now being resumed. I'll first turn the floor over to Mr. Wiedefeld and his team to start us on our first item, our discussion of the capital budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, it's an exciting time actually for our capital budget. We made quite a bit of progress thanks to the dedicated revenue and also the federal money that we get, particularly the PREA money and the new infrastructure money. So I think it's a good news story where we've been over the last few years and where we're headed and the results of those investments. So Tom Webster, I believe, is going to walk through the entire program to give you more detail.
Good morning, and thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Tom Webster. I'm Metro's Executive Vice President for Strategy, Planning, and Program Management. And the purpose, as was mentioned, of today's meeting is to recap the proposed capital program and a committee work session on that program. We'll start with a brief video highlighting progress over the past year.
I knew there was going to be a video, but I wasn't expecting such snappy music, Tom. You woke us up.
Thanks to Lynn's team for that. Metro's capital program, as you all know, is focused on improving system safety, state of good repair, and reliability. The program's focused on largely on replacing, rehabilitating, and modernizing the system and its assets, incorporating resiliency and sustainability through those investments. Of course, over the past several years, Metro's annual capital investment has nearly tripled. We are accelerating the delivery of projects to address critical overdue needs and to get in front of long-term state of good repair and reliability programs. The capital program as proposed maintains our fiscal accountability and our commitments to our partners in the region, the jurisdictions, and our federal partners. We are including, again, the 3% aggregate cap on jurisdictional capital contributions, as was agreed to as part of dedicated funding. And of course, leveraging dedicated funding and issuing long-term debt to support, again, the acceleration of those projects and programs for state of good repair. Metro's capital program is structured to both support investment decision-making and to support safety, state of good repair, and reliability over the long term. The program consists of a 10-year capital plan that includes viable initiatives, needs, projects, and programs for roughly the next 10 years. That 10-year plan and outlook is financially unconstrained, but essentially includes all of those needs and projects that are reasonably expected to be completed during that period. We have a 6-year capital improvement program that is financially constrained based on reasonable estimates of the funding that will be available during that period. And it includes, for the most part, projects and programs that are underway, that are scoped, that have cost estimates and that are planned for that 6-year period. The Metro's 1-year capital budget is essentially the cash flow estimates and the forecast for those projects that are included in that financially constrained 6-year program. Back in December, Metro published our proposed capital program document. It's now the 2nd year where we have published detailed project investment pages, that 10-year outlook, and the inventory of all of the needs and safety, reliability, state of good repair programs that we are aware of for the 10-year period. Includes the forecast for the 10-year period, and as I mentioned, those detailed capital investment pages. Proposed capital program is structured again. We split the planned investments for the 6-year period and the annual budget into 6 investment categories for essentially for ease of communication. The proposed capital budget is $2.3 billion. And the 6-year total is about $12.4 billion. These next 6 slides go into some detail on each of the 6 investment categories. So I'll just hit some highlights here. So in railcar facilities, about $2.4 billion is planned for the next 6 years. And again, we have initiated the 8000 series railcar acquisition program. That program will replace the 2000 and 3000 railcars that are reaching the end of useful life. They went into service during the 1980s. And we also have a number of programs for rehabilitation and maintenance of railcars, as well as the construction of the heavy repair and overhaul facility, and rehabilitation and replacement of rail yard and rail facility, maintenance facility assets. In rail systems, an area of significant investment, again, during the 6-year period and into the future, continuing rehabilitation and maintenance of train control systems and preparing for the next generation program. In power, continuing again, maintenance, rehabilitation, replacement and upgrade of our power systems that support rail service. And then in other rail system investments, communication systems, emergency phone and other safety-related projects in the rail system. Track and structures rehabilitation, continuing and sustaining that reinvestment and maintenance and rehabilitation in track and the infrastructure that supports the track, and ramped up and significant investment in structures, so tunnels, bridges, other aerials, both that support the rail system and access to it. In stations and passenger facilities, we're entering the final phase, phase 4 of the platform rehabilitation program this summer. So the final stations of the 20 identified as needing reinvestment. We are continuing programs to improve and upgrade both assets that customers see, so things like escalators, the passenger information displays in stations, as well as substantial investment in some of the behind-the-scenes things at stations and in our passenger facilities, like chillers, sewage ejection systems, all those things that are sort of in the back of house that provide service to customers. In bus facilities and paratransit, we're continuing our very successful bus replacement, rehabilitation, and maintenance programs. And of course, we have started the replacement of both Northern and Bladensburg bus facilities that will now be designed and constructed to be electric bus ready with electric charging infrastructure built into those new facilities that will replace facilities that are well beyond useful life. The program also includes our test and evaluation program for electric buses, the acquisition of some initial buses and the evaluation of that, as well as charging infrastructure at a couple of our facilities. We've also begun the planning of the replacement of Western Bus Garage, which is the next oldest and next in line for replacement. And then finally, in operations and business support, we are progressing the office consolidation program with the new office buildings scheduled to open over the next couple of years. We are continuing that operations and business software and hardware support, and as well as replacement of our service vehicles and some of the facility infrastructure, such as roofs and other infrastructure that supports, again, operations and the business. So over the 10-year period, we're estimating approximately $23 billion of needed investment and reinvestment in the system. And as I mentioned, the 6-year program totals $12.4 billion, and essentially the expenditure estimate and forecast for FY23 is right now about $2.3 billion. Over the 10-year period, again, the $23 billion estimate includes financially unconstrained estimates for the latter 4 years, as you see on this chart. And of course, we have unfunded and underfunded investments over the long term, a number of which are listed on the right. Continued and sustained state of good repair investment beyond the 6-year period, beyond the 10-year period. That 8000 series railcar acquisition, there are options included in that railcar contract for additional railcars that are at this point unfunded. The next generation signal system program will continue beyond the 6 and the 10-year period. Our full implementation of the zero emission bus program, again, extends beyond this 10-year period and will require substantial investment to upgrade facilities, equipment, infrastructure, and of course the vehicles themselves. We have a number of other projects, again, that we're advancing during the 6-year period, hope to continue advancing during the 10-year period, and will certainly continue beyond into the 2030 decade. This next slide on the left-hand side displays again the investment by category and the plan there, as well as estimates for revenue loss attributable to capital projects, as well as debt service estimates for next fiscal year and the 6-year period. And on the right-hand side is our financial plan as of the proposed budget from the fall. including estimates for formula grants, PREA funding, state and local contributions, as well as our reimbursable program and debt for the budget year, as well as an outlook for the 6-year period. Since that time, Congress acted on the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and that presents a tremendous opportunity, obviously, for transportation, for transit, and for Metro in this region. It will allow us to continue investing in state of good repair and safety needs. Specifically, it reauthorizes PREA at $150 million a year, with a set aside of $5 million for the OIG per year. It increases federal formula programs at the authorization level by about 30% in aggregate, and includes significant increased opportunity for competitive and discretionary grants. One area of highlight is low and no emission bus programs, and that presents an opportunity, again, for Metro and other transit agencies to accelerate those programs. Of course, that authorization is subject to appropriation each year and the apportionment and regional allocation processes. It also will help, additional funding would help extend Metro's capacity to issue dedicated funding-backed debt for future capital investments, and will help us address some, as you know, changing market conditions for cost of construction and equipment acquisition. So Metro's capital program over the past several years, we have been making substantial progress in, as I discussed, reducing the backlog, reducing or addressing overdue capital needs, replacing legacy rail cars, significant investment in our track and rehabilitation, as well as the platform program, among others. We still have much work to do, Metro and the region, in catching up on those overdue needs. Some areas of highlight: structures, so bridges and the platforms I mentioned before, our rail systems, as well as some of our antiquated facilities that are well beyond useful life, including our bus divisions, rail maintenance facilities, and administrative facilities. In addition to those programs and projects that address those overdue needs, Metro has established a number of cyclical maintenance, rehabilitation, replacement programs that touch each of the assets and the equipment and the infrastructure in the system. And these are critical to staying ahead of safety, state of good repair, and reliability needs, and not allowing that backlog or those overdue needs to accumulate again. So Metro, periodically, we do an estimate of our state of good repair needs, our state of good repair backlog, and since 2016, when one of those estimates was done, Metro and the region have made very significant progress in addressing those overdue capital state of good repair needs. So back in 2016, the backlog was estimated at about $7 billion, and that regional and federal investment and successful and accelerated program and project delivery have driven that down to an estimated about $4 billion now. And at the end of the 6-year period, we're forecasting about a backlog of about $3 billion. You see that significant investment in vehicles, in track and structures, stations and systems, driving that backlog down. Planned investment in, again, structures, systems, and facilities over the next 6 years, driving that down further. And those backlog and overdue needs that will remain at the end of the 6-year period will continue to be addressed beyond, subject to availability of funding and investment. Essentially, those investments will continue because of project schedules and the time it takes to reinvest in the system. And again, regional dedicated funding, the jurisdictional funding, PREA, and federal investment have allowed us to drive down that backlog. This is an illustrative chart that shows if that investment had not been made, we would have continued to see that backlog and those overdue needs grow. Of course, there are a number of factors, many factors that are going to influence the future trend on our overdue needs and backlog. So we continue to learn and identify and refine capital needs and state of good repair investments. Again, back in 2016, there were some needs that were not yet identified or not yet fully scoped. So we've been adding those into the program and into our needs forecasts. Needs continue to emerge, and again, staying on top of refining what those needs are and what the projects are to address them will lead to changes in estimates and changes to the program. And the market condition changes that I mentioned earlier. We do order of magnitude estimating in capital needs forecasting when it actually comes to the project and the contracts to advance the work. Those estimates will change and will be refined. That continued state of good repair investment from the region and the potential for substantially increased federal investment in Metro's capital program will also, of course, influence that long-term outlook. A number of risks and considerations for the program that several of which I've already mentioned, but our supply chain has experienced some delays. So across the program, whether it's the chips that drive some of the equipment, things like tile, steel, and really sort of across the board, there have been impacts as virtually every transit and transportation agency is experiencing now. We're doing our best to address and adjust for those supply chain issues. We're finding schedules and updating work programs to accommodate those issues. There are significant opportunities, as I mentioned, both in federal formula programs and then those potential discretionary and competitive programs. And then over the long term, as discussed, the need for sustained investment in state of good repair and some of our transformational opportunities. And then just briefly on the schedule again, so the public hearings were this week. Public comment period ends next Tuesday, February 15th. The adoption of the capital and operating budget, as well as the 6-year capital program, are scheduled for March. And just a reminder on why that's important, Metro has a process with the Federal Transit Administration where we apply for our federal formula grants. That process takes some time. Budget adoption and capital program adoption in March allows for that process to proceed and for that federal funding to be available early in Metro's fiscal year so that reimbursement can start for that federally funded work. And of course, adoption in March also allows for a preparation of implementation of the budget year. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I will conclude, and I'm happy to support the committee's discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I will turn it over first to members of the committee and then the whole board for questions. If you just want to use the raised hand feature, I'll just kind of kick one off while folks are getting started. You mentioned that the infrastructure bill should help with expanded capacity to issue debt. Can you tell us, roughly by how much? We kind of know that we're going to start running out of the funding, dedicated funding. We thought around 27 or 28. Has that estimate changed now as a result of what happened with that bill?
Yeah, certainly the reauthorization of PREA and the potential for increased formula program funding will extend that capacity. We're updating those estimates. Last year, we had roughly estimated it at 2028. It's probably extended to about a 10-year period now, but there's a lot of variables that influence that: the rate of capital delivery, the borrowing rates, and what the markets look like, and then of course appropriations of those federal funding programs, and then continued regional investment in the system. So a lot of variables, but certainly increased funding for state of good repair increases capacity overall for the program.
When you say a 10-year period, you don't mean 10 years beyond what we expected. You mean 31, 32 timeframe.
Yeah, into the beginning of next decade, yes.
All right, Secretary Ports.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Tom, for that presentation. I too was wanting to talk about the IIJA funds and how we set expectations. I know you did say it includes around 30% increase, but that includes discretionary and competitive program, which kind of in my mind sets an expectation it's not quite there, if you know what I mean, because it is very competitive all across the nation. As opposed to the formula funds, which is probably about a 20% increase. But even that doesn't tell the whole story, because I'll give the Maryland example. That 20% increase is about 1 billion for highways, 300 million for transit, and 158 million for airports. So I just want to make sure that when we're talking about this and financing and moving forward, that we're not setting expectations up here for all this cash that's coming in, because it's not true. You know, we again, for example, 300 million for transit for us is in many people's eyes a low number compared to highways and other issues. So I just want to keep it in perspective as we move forward. And I'd rather use the 20% formula funding figure. And I mean, we could talk about the 10% discretionary competitive, yes, but I don't think we should just say it is a 30% increase. That's all. Thank you. But good presentation, by the way.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. I think next we have Ms. Klein.
Yep, thank you. Actually, two of my questions have kind of been answered, so I just want to say thank you to Chairman Letourneau for asking about the debt, because I do think it's important to keep in mind that we are kind of front loading our investments here. And folks should be aware that we do have the dedicated funding. It does come in over, a 10-year period, but that doesn't mean it's just equally available over all those 10 years. So I appreciated that answer as well about the IIJA and the impact of the reauthorization of PREA in there. Important thing to keep our eyes on. I'm not sure what the answer is yet, but something to work on. Also, as Secretary Ports noted, I was interested in the IIJA funding, because it does sound like a lot when you say 30% increase in funding. But when you look at the portion of our budget, capital budget, that is federal funding, it's not actually a humongous slice. It's smaller than some of the others. So given that, there is still likely to be some increase, assuming Congress does at some point complete the appropriations process. Is Metro prepared to absorb that into the capital program next year? Are there steps that need to be taken now to ensure that we'll be able to expeditiously get those funds out the door?
So I appreciate the question. Yes, we are prepared certainly to adjust the program, and certainly to apply both for the whatever the appropriate and apportioned formula programs are, and to aggressively pursue those competitive programs. And to that point, we will recommend changes to the financial outlook as we go here to the financial plan, rather than essentially banking those funds now prior to the appropriation. So we're prepared, and we'll update the plan as more information is known. Yeah.
And we have enough people to do the work when there's that increase in funding?
Yes, and there are, of course, challenges in the labor market, as you all know. So continuing to pursue that talent and that workforce to advance the capital program is an area of focus for us. But certainly the resources are there, and plans in place to continue to support that.
Good. That's good to hear. And my last question is, and I think I've asked this before, but I just kind of want to reiterate it. There is a huge amount of money available in the competitive side, particularly for electric buses, as you mentioned, and electrification of facilities. But that's not going to be an ongoing, well, I don't know, maybe it'll be an ongoing investment forever that the feds are going to make. But right now it's 5 years of that program. So are we prepared to apply for that and make use of it? And can that be used to expedite and accelerate the transition to a zero emission fleet?
Yes, I think Metro is well positioned for this. The board's action last year to set the interim and the long-term goals around zero emission, as well as the adoption of the Metrobus fleet plan in December, are sort of the foundational pieces that are needed to lay out that plan. Congress did include a requirement for a transition plan as part of the requirements for that competitive program. Metro started ours following on building the detail out from the Metrobus fleet plan. It essentially looks at equipment, vehicles, all the facilities, and all the coordination that's needed. And that will position us well, I think, for that competition with other agencies for that funding.
Great. And actually, just one little note on the transition plan. You mentioned looking at the facilities and the vehicles and the coordination, et cetera. One of the most important pieces of the electrification is actually the folks who are going to be maintaining and operating the new electric vehicles. So I just encourage, full consideration of the training needs to make sure that the workforce is up to speed on all the differences between an electric vehicle and a traditional one. And I hope that you'll be working with employees to kind of build out that aspect of the plan.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Next is Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Chairman. Sarah just asked a question that I was going to ask specifically about bus electrification. Mr. Webster, I have to be honest and say that when I reviewed the fleet management plan, I had some significant concerns about how ready to undertake bus electrification WMATA seemed, and about really how effective that document was as a platform to proceed with electrification. I've shared those questions and concerns with you. I'm not persuaded, but I'm not reassured by just like hearing you verbally say like, yes, we are ready. I think there are some really specific issues that we need to address. These are issues that were raised by WMATA itself in the 2020 bus electrification update document. I didn't see these concerns addressed in the 2021 update to that publication. It's now 2022, and I still don't know where we are on key elements of this stuff regarding what rate we're going to be paying for electricity and what's going to happen in terms of facilities, like where the buses are going to be parked and where they're going to be charged, especially at bus barns that we don't control. I think that there are big outstanding questions, and that we are not positioning ourselves for maximum competitiveness for federal funds without answering those questions. I think that I need to see more urgency around getting those questions answered, so that we can make sure that we are out there hustling for every federal dollar that we're eligible for. I think that we need to show that urgency to our local funding partners, because it's not reasonable for us to go to local general purpose governments that are extremely strained financially and ask for more money of any kind if we are not demonstrating absolute maximum leverage on federal funds. So I hope that we can make some more progress on this, because I am not convinced that we're there. Regarding the big picture with the CIP, I think that it's awesome that your presentation was great, and I think it's awesome that WMATA is at a new level in terms of transparency in describing what's in the capital plan. Because if we are asking for capital money, it is extremely helpful to be able to show exactly what we're going to spend it on. So I really want to commend you and your team for getting to that new level of transparency. I think that anyone who has questions about what we're spending the money on, now there's an exhaustive document that shows what we're spending the money on. I know that this is new and that this is only the second year that we've done this, but I think it's already time to try to take it to a next level. And instead of just providing this sort of like blizzard of transparency, to start thinking about how to help our stakeholders understand the story of what's happening with the capital improvement program at WMATA. And that means not just showing an enormous, like hundreds of pages of projects, but that means helping our stakeholders understand what we've accomplished in the capital program so far, not just in terms of like overall magnitude of dollars, or this big picture of the backlog, but looking at some specific capital projects and what the return on improvement on investment for those projects has been, and what the lessons we've learned are, and how we're applying those going forward to how we do capital programming. I think that I understand that I'm asking you to do something this is kind of tricky, right? Like sewage ejection, for example. Like, by all means, let's eject the sewage. Who could put a dollar figure on the value of ejecting? Isn't it really priceless? So I understand that I'm not talking about something that's going to be incredibly simple, or that we're going to be able to express in like a single graph or all in dollars or whatever. But I think that we do need to think about how to tell this story of the capital projects that we've done, what the return on the investment has been, and how we're applying lessons learned going forward. And I think it's okay for part of that story to say like, wow, here's something we like spent money on that like maybe like wasn't worth it. or we got outpaced by the technology. Like, it's okay if that's in the story. But also in the story, I think will be like, we spent $1 here and we saved having to shut the entire system down later here. So I think people need help to understand these really big dollar figures that we're talking about and this really big book of projects. So I hope that we big picture can think in the next year, couple years, about how to critically reflect back on these first few years of dedicated capital funding from the members of the compact, and what the potential is going forward, based on lessons learned. So this is just something to think about. This can't be like an immediate action item, and I understand that, like, yeah, I'm sure your team is already very busy, but this is something that can have internal and external benefit. So I hope that you'll think about this for your team.
Tom, did you want to respond to the first part of the discussion on electrification?
Yes, certainly, and thank you, Dr. Lowe, for the comments. Certainly the electric bus program is complex and not without challenges. I don't want to suggest otherwise. We are planning an update for the board for this spring to walk through in detail each of the areas of the program, what progress has been made, and where we have more work to do, both Metro and our partners. I think this is a program we have been standing up. So yes, it is going to be a challenge, and we need to be aggressive in these next steps. I think we're positioned well to do that, and we'll go into that in some detail this spring.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that, because this isn't just about like what WMATA needs to do. We also have to communicate to our stakeholders what the barriers to full electrification are that we need to address as a bigger group and as a region. If we don't communicate that, ball's in our court, and it looks like we're not getting it done.
Okay, we'll move on to Mr. Smemberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tom, I think it was slide 25 or 26. You had the backlog highlighted there with the 4 bars. or the 5 bars. And my question is, in the systems category there, that bar, I believe, was pretty high, or have it noted here was pretty high. What specifically are your biggest items in that section there?
So
Curiosity.
Mr. Chairman, the biggest things there are the power systems, so propulsion power for the rail system, the signaling system, so automatic train control, and all of the infrastructure that supports that. And then, of course, the operations and business support systems that, like the financial system and things like of that nature. So, again, progress has been made. More work is planned for the 6-year period, and then some of that is extending beyond the 6-year period, just because of the length of time that's required to implement projects of that scale.
Yeah, thanks. And then a few slides back, there was a reference. State of good repair. There was a little thing there that caught my eye about the 40 bridges. I think it was slide 19. I think I have in my note. Yeah, slide 19. What does that mean? Does that mean literally 40 bridges, or is that the name for a particular section of track, or what is that exactly?
It is literally for about 40.
Okay.
The needs forecast from that time included some estimates of bridge and aerial structure, rehabilitation and replacement. We've learned more since then. So that's an example of somewhere where we've refined the estimates and included needs and potential projects that weren't detailed in that previous forecast.
Yeah, I remember way back when started these SGR projects and laid out how how much we had to do. I remember hearing about bridges in general, but that sort of caught my eye. So, and Tom, thank you. Obviously this has come a very long way, and obviously we've been to have the money we've had from the federal government to invest in all of this has really helped. But as Secretary Ports and Tracy just said, it's our partners are looking at this, and it is important to them, and I think they're pleased at the progress we've made. Obviously, some of it, as we said yesterday on the Hill, we see the bright and shiny stuff, but it's all that other stuff that's important to the safety and reliability of the system that they don't see, that is equally, if not more important in a lot of ways. So thank you. I mean, and it's not only you, obviously, it's Andy's team and the other people that are implementing and on the ground working on all these projects. So thanks, but more to come for sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drummer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my topic area is offering a consideration for planning down the line that I hadn't heard in many of the presentations. As we work our way through this regional, national, and international transition to renewable energy, I think there's a transformational opportunity in what we're doing in our capital planning that you might want to address down the line. It's in cost savings and cost avoidance, specifically in bus operations or in support of bus facilities. And my question is, do we have anyone that's focused on renewable energy integration into our plans for the future? Specifically, as an example, roof space, solar energy, power production, where we do our own production of power, if you would, overhead parking, coverage space, and unused land for microgrid solar energy production. I bring those up, and it goes back to what Tracy talked about, a return on investment. And as we get government dollars and jurisdictional dollars, if we can produce our own energy, that's an opportunity for return on investment, and we'll probably have some pretty positive focus on that. So not looking for answers right now, but certainly some planning considerations that I hadn't heard discussed. And we have an opportunity to get on board of this transition that's about to kick in gear as technology improves.
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. Let me hit a couple of highlights, and then we do actually have right now launching a program to install solar on believe it's 4 parking garages in the system. It's a partnership to do that. And with each of our new bus facilities and parking facilities and other buildings, exploring exactly what you just described, solar on the roof, stacking parking for buses and for employee vehicles, visitor vehicles, that sort of thing, within the confined space, maximizing the use of that space. So again, a topic I'm happy to go into some more detail on when we do our sustainability and zero emission update in the spring. And certainly there are opportunities to pursue in the 6-year program and beyond that, beyond what we've done so far. So appreciate the highlighting that as an opportunity area. Thank you.
Great. And I really appreciate the fact that you all are moving in that direction. And thanks again for your presentations. Technology has been stuck for about 15 years and it's getting better. So if we keep our finger on the pulse of that, as you are doing, I think we can really make some headway. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions and discussion. The only other thing that I would just highlight, and it's really more of a comment, is the sort of the capital risks. I think it's actually like the next slide. But, you know, I'm experiencing this in Loudoun County with our capital program in a major way. And it really shouldn't be lost on anyone how challenging it is right now, both from a materials and parts standpoint, but also from a budgeting standpoint. Cost escalation right now is really, really high in the market. And so, you know, we're going to get less for what we have, you know, moving forward. I will just maybe ask you, Tom, if you could, just to comment a little bit more on this in terms of whether we're seeing, you know, any significant issues right now with projects that are ongoing that are seeing delays or, you know, the inability to complete something because of a lack of a part or something like that.
Yeah, we are experiencing some of that. There are sort of issues across the board with, you know, specific parts or components for projects. Just a couple of examples. Replacement tile for our stations. We're seeing some delays in the acquisition of that, which is causing us to sort of reshuffle some of our fare gate work to deal with those supply issues. I think many of you have heard about the microchips. So that's important for obviously a lot of our equipment investments. So fare boxes are dependent on those microchips as well. So
I thought the fare box issue was steel.
There are potential steel issues too, but microchips is going to impact our schedule. Hopefully not too significantly. And then you know, multiple issues again with steel and supplies for programs like bus rehabilitation. Most of those programs are, you know, continuing and are able to adjust for those issues, but some sort of spot delays and things that are occurring as a result. So we're watching this closely, and the project and program teams are trying to adapt where they can, but it is having impact on schedules and impact on cash flow as a result of that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, you know, and I want it to be said because it really is something that every government, and I'm sure the private sector as well, is experiencing. This is not a unique issue to WMATA. So when these things come up in the future, and if we do have some delays that are higher profile, it's, you know, it's worth noting that this issue is a macro issue. It's not because of something WMATA did or didn't do. Okay, any other final comments from staff on the capital budget?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Paul Wiedefeld, a few, and the chairman Chairman Smedberg just mentioned this, but really this is a huge team effort, right? Because it takes obviously all the efforts of Tom and his staff, but clearly Andy and his staff to deliver Joe's the chief operating officer to make sure that we can do this work out there. Procurement and particularly some of the focus we put on both DBE and MBE participation in a lot of our projects. Dennis's team, the finance team, in basically setting up the financial structure to make this all work. But most importantly, our customers, because at the end of the day, a lot of these projects have impacted our customers.
Yeah.
I think we all recognize that it's some needed pain, but I think you also see the product the other side is worth the pain. So I just want to, again, thank obviously the internal team, but really our customers for understanding, you know, the heavy lift that we're doing. But at the end of the day, it is a better product for them, both now and into the future.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just amplify that again, back to the story of where we've come to where we are today, Mr. Wiedefeld, not only is this our largest capital endeavor ever, but, you know, as you've highlighted up on the Hill yesterday and in other settings, you know, nationally, this is a very, very large capital expenditure by a transit agency. And I don't think people realize, you know, again, some people see the shiny and new in the stations, but it's all that other stuff that is really critical to a safe, reliable system that they don't see. It has really been a monumental task given what you all inherited to where we are today. So, yeah.
And the result, obviously, of the region coming together for the dedicated revenue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that was essential. That was essential. Without it, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is also an information item, and it is an update on fare evasion. I think I'm turning this over to Mr. Webster or Mr. Anasike.
Thank you, Chairman Letourneau. And good morning, members of the committee. My name is Dennis Anasike, Chief Financial Officer for Metro. My presentation is stuck. Okay, so today I am joined by Mr. Webster, EVP for Planning and Strategy, as well as Joe Leder, who's Metro's Chief Operating Officer, to update the committee on the estimated financial impacts of fare evasion on Metro. As context, Mr. Chairman, Metro measures fare evasion on Metro bus using a key on the fare box, which operators press when a rider is observed evading fares on Metro bus. The data that's collected through this process is compared to other data on Metro bus, as well as revenue, including automatic passenger counter data, which captures entries and exits on the bus, and automatic fare collection data, which records fare payments. Combined, this information ensures directional accuracy for staff with respect to fare evasion. On Metro Rail, fare evasion, on the other hand, is measured on an assumed rate, which at this point or historically has been 2% of Metro Rail ridership. This assumption is based on rail peer averages, as well as periodic observation within the system by traffic checkers. So overall, the current fare evasion estimation approach lacks strict scientific methodology. However, the processes that are applied to it and the checks that are in addition applied to the process ensure that the data that comes out of it is directionally accurate and perhaps could result in systemic understatement of the fare evasion that occurs in the system. Fiscal year 2029 is Metro's most recent fiscal year that was not impacted by COVID-19. As such, today's update uses fiscal year 2029 data as a proxy for a normal year in terms of systemic fare evasion. As you can see from the slide, Metro lost an estimated $36 million due to fare evasion in fiscal year 2029. That amount consists of $26 million on Metro Bus and $10 million on Metro Rail, as shown by the graph on the left. The ridership graph for the same fiscal year, which is on the right, underscores the prevalence of fare evasion on Metro Bus, even though Metro Bus carries less riders than Metro Rail. And in that year, Metro Bus was 41%, while Metro Rail was 60% of total trips for Metro. As Metro's ridership has declined as a result of the pandemic, the rate of fare evasion on Metro Bus has actually increased as laid out on this particular slide. Again, the chart on the left shows the trend for paid ridership, which is shown in the light blue line, as well as unpaid ridership, which is the darker line since fiscal year 2016. In the first half of this fiscal year, 9 million fare evasion incidents were recorded on Metro Bus, involving about 26 million trips. That leads to about a 34% fare evasion ratio, compared to 14% in 2019 and slightly higher 17% in 2020. The slide on the right, or rather the graph on the right, simply shows, illustrates the trend graphically, showing what's actually happening on the left-hand side, again, starting from fiscal year 2016. Slide 6 breaks down Metro Bus fare evasion rates by jurisdiction, at least as of second quarter fiscal year 2022, compared to the same period in fiscal year 2020. I think system-wide, bus fare evasion rates have doubled from 2020 to 2022. And at the jurisdictional level, the graphs also show similar growth rates. Finally, slide 7 shows estimated financial impact of fare evasion on Metro as of this fiscal year. For the period ending in December 2021, total revenue loss due to fare evasion is estimated at $10 million, as shown by the graph on the right, which includes $8.6 million from Metro Bus and about $1.5 or $1.4 million for Metro Rail. And as the committee will recall, the board suspended fare collections on Metro Bus from Q4 of 2020 through Q2 of 2021 to protect operators and riders. And during that time, Metro did not track Metro Bus fare evasion, which is reflected on the graph on the left. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Webster.
Thank you, Dennis. Looking ahead, and as Dennis mentioned, the estimates show of bus and rail fare evasion show directionally and the size of the problem. But there are projects underway for the board's awareness that will help us better understand and project with or estimate with greater accuracy the size of that problem. So specifically, our fare gate modernization program, which is underway, and many stations have those new fare gates today, and all will have them likely by early 2023. Those fare gates have new sensors that will allow us to, again, better estimate fare evasion within the rail system. We're also looking at analytical techniques to refine those estimates. And of course, Metro and the jurisdictions can continue work together on enforcement strategies and enforcement policies moving forward. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that's the conclusion of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So once again, I'll look for hands and go to committee members first, and then everybody else. So just to ask on the rail side. So I mean, right now the number is just not really based on anything happening in our system. It's just an estimate that it's 2%, right?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The new fare gates have, well, there's already, I think, there's a noise associated when it's recording somebody who is not paying. That's already becoming a bit, unfortunately, prevalent in some of the stations that you hear. You said that we're in the process of deploying those fare gates. We know that they're being installed. But right now, the data isn't clear enough to be able to share with the board from what we've learned so far from those.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, at this point, the data being produced by the fare gates is producing a lot of noise. So we have some analytical work happening to help produce some estimates that then we can share with the board and with the jurisdictions.
Okay. As I recall the discussion about those new fare gates, they were supposed to make it more difficult to evade. Is there any evidence that that has actually been the case?
This is Matt Hardison. I am running the fare gates program. If I can answer that question, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I don't think we have enough information to be able to determine if the fare gates have reduced fare evasion. That's part of what we really need to accomplish in the next step in the analysis. The sensors are giving us a lot of false alarms, especially in places like National Airport, where people are pulling suitcases behind them. So our plan is to look at the data, do some in-person surveys, overlay that with the data, and then to establish a better estimate of what the actual evasion rates are. And I think ultimately we'll have much better information across the system by station to really give us better insights there.
Okay. I mean, just my hunch is that 2% is a very, very low estimate, and that number is probably much higher. So, as is the revenue number associated with it. But
I think you may be right
that,
about that.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I think you may be right about that, but of course, we want to confirm the actual performance.
Any idea when that work would be better available for us? Is that something we could expect in the next few months, or?
Well, we're going to be working over it over the course of this calendar year as we expand the installation of our fare gates. Of course, we'll have all fare gates installed system-wide by early 23. So certainly no later than then, but I think we'll have some directional information over the course of 22.
Okay. Ms. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple of, excuse me. There's a couple of comments that I wanted to make, and then a couple of questions. First of all, I shared your reading of the numbers that the rail number is, I mean, it's virtually meaningless, not entirely perhaps, but very difficult to draw conclusions from that. And I was actually curious, when you say that it's an industry standard, there's really only a handful of systems that have fare gates, heavy rail with fare gates. Do you know, are we talking industry like heavy rail with fare gates, or are you just talking across rail altogether?
Well, we are talking heavy rail altogether.
Okay, I mean, I think it'll be very enlightening once we get the new fare gates in place. I apologize for some background noise if folks are picking that up. My second comment is I almost, just as we're looking at the rail number and it seems, we have to kind of discount it or look at it with a little bit of skepticism because we're not sure that that's actually what's going on in the system. I think putting out the chart, and I don't remember which slide it was on, that showed the percentage of trips on Metrobus and Metro Rail that are experiencing fare evasion is also something that needs to be looked at with a little bit of skepticism, because to say that 34% of trips are not being paid for, well, when you're looking at a percentage, what matters is the denominator, right? And our denominator of trips in 2022, 2021, 2020 is so much smaller than what it was before that, of course, even if fare evasion were staying constant, like it was, 6 people who were doing it every single day, the percentage would skyrocket because the overall number of trips has gone way down. So I think it would just be helpful for everyone to keep in mind that what I think is most important here is more the raw numbers, the trends with regard to number of trips for which fares are not paid, and not worrying quite as much about percentages, which look like an alarming skyrocketing of fare evasion when I'm not sure that's the case. I do see in the raw numbers a general increase, but it's not at the scale that it sort of seems like if you just look at the percentages. So those are my comments. My question is, do we have, has WMATA in the past done, or maybe even in the industry, if you know, done any kind of exploration of the causes of fare evasion? Because I feel like the solutions are probably going to depend to some extent on the causes, the underlying causes. So, I can speculate on what those might be. Fares are too high for some folks to afford. Perhaps the solution might, be addressing the cost of the fares. Maybe there's some confusion. We eliminated fares for a while. We had from fare-free service for the pandemic. Maybe people didn't know when it was coming back. That's a different solution. That's education, clearer communication. Maybe it's, there are some programs in which, for example, students ride free. Maybe they don't know that they have to actually swipe their card still, even though the ride will be free to them. So that's also more of an educational and communication thing. So are you aware of any kind of, I don't exactly know how one might gather this data, but any kind of survey or reports on this sort of causal aspect of this?
No, Director Klein. I am not aware of any studies that any other agency has done focused on the causal factors for fare evasion. And I do not believe that WMATA has done a study, at least not since I've been here. But if the committee or the board wishes to have WMATA undertake that, we'll certainly do so.
I think it's something we might want to consider. I'll talk with my fellow board members about whether that's something that's worthwhile. Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Klein. Dr. Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Okay. This presentation and the report that it's based on really have only a brief mention of how very poor quality our fare evasion data are. But then it presents conclusions, including this imputed fare revenue loss that implied total certainty about the data. We're simply stating dollar figures. I think it's interesting that that's acceptable practice at WMATA and that that's considered ready for board and public consumption. I think we need to reconsider why we are drawing conclusions based on, in some cases, literally non-existent data. Mr. Anasoki, you mentioned a couple times that you think, maybe we're undercounting fare evasion. On what basis would we conclude we might be undercounting fare evasion? And is it possible we are overcounting fare evasion?
Thank you, Dr. Lowe. The reason why, let me just step back. The way WMATA is counting or estimating fare evasion is not just a WMATA phenomena. If you look at New York, Chicago, some other agencies, you're seeing similar methodologies, approaches utilized, and you're seeing similar results. Now, part of the reason why I indicated a possible undercount is because the way this data is collected is by the operator on bus, by the operator pressing a particular key on the fare box. And I think, it is entirely possible that occasionally happens when you have more than one of few individuals entering the bus at the same time, and the capacity of the bus operator to record accurately those numbers is diminished. And that results in potential undercounts. And then when you overlay that data to the APC data, which is significantly higher than the farebox data in terms of actual ridership, that suggests that there are potential rides that had not been counted, but had not been paid for. When you then take another look with respect to the AFC data that indicates how much revenue was collected based on that particular trip. So all of the indications that we know this, and we've studied this, that we know that the data is directionally correct, but that the results is suddenly open to potential undercount.
Yeah, and I'm not challenging the directionality here. I see what you're saying. Like, okay, if we're wrong, we're at least like the same amount wrong this year as we were last year, for example. So to everyone's question about the new fare gates and their anti-fare evasion, design elements and how they're working, I have received one complaint from a customer in the district that, as I'm sure everyone's aware, children under the age of 5 ride free throughout the Metro Rail and Metro Bus system and do not need to pay. I received a complaint from a customer who tried to pass through one of the new fare gates. Part of the anti-fare evasion design is that the new ones close very quickly after one person goes through them. She tried to walk through with a 4-year-old child who's obviously physically capable of walking on their own, and the fare gates closed on the child and injured them. So we know that the design is working as intended, except that what it prevented was not fare evasion because the child didn't need to pay. I think that we do have this big picture issue here of not knowing who fare evaders are and why they're evading. So, for example, we don't know what percentage of riders who don't pay are children. And a couple of people have already mentioned that in the District of Columbia, for example, that WMATA is the school transportation provider for the district, that the district really helps WMATA by providing a lot of guaranteed customers to the system through the Kids Ride Free program. I'd like to clarify for everyone that the district makes a payment to WMATA for the Kids Ride Free program that's based on estimated usage of the program and does not require these children to tap every time. It's helpful if the children tap because then we can use that to understand which routes kids are relying on the most to get to school. We can use that for planning purposes. That's obviously helpful. I will say, as the parent of a DCPS student that's enrolled in the Kids Ride Free program, I want my child to tap because this is just part of teaching kids how to grow up and become adults in the city. They need to learn how to use transit on their own. I will not always be there. They need to be able to tap to understand that that's just part of how you use transit. So I certainly like the kids having cards, but I just want to understand, I'd like everyone to understand here that a significant chunk of what drivers are logging as fare evasion, in fact, could potentially be trips that are paid for. And we do not know, based on the data that we have right now, whether this is 80% of the fare evasion that we're logging or 10%. We don't know. And we need to find out if we're planning to draw any conclusions from these data. So for example, the conclusion the report draws about how much revenue WMATA might be losing through fare evasion, we actually have no idea how much confidence we can have in that conclusion. But let's say we did have some kind of confidence in that conclusion and that WMATA is losing $10 million to fare evasion. What percentage of WMATA's annual revenue is that?
It's a fairly pre-COVID is a fairly insignificant number.
By fairly insignificant, do you mean less than 1%?
Correct.
Okay,
Pre-COVID, but.
got it. So this is a report about a loss that might be less than 1%. Okay, understood. So I think that it's clear that if we want to even understand fair evasion, that we need different data and we need better data than are currently presented to the board quarterly in this report. And there's no reason to keep doing the same thing every quarter and then expecting a different result. So I think we as a board should have a discussion about what data we really need to understand whether this is even an issue at all.
Any other questions from board members or committee members? All right, if not, Dennis, can we go back to the discussion on the school program and what Dr. Lowe was just saying about there not being a requirement to tap in, because that wasn't my understanding, and that's new information. And B, how do bus operators record situations when there are students who are not tapping in? And then I guess C would be, do we have any idea or estimate how much of this number could be students that potentially are paid for through the district, but are not being recorded?
With respect to the Kids Ride Free program, each participant is provided a smart trip card, with which they are required to tap into the system on rail and on bus. Right. So that's the requirement. That's the agreement that we have with the district. We certainly recognize that some kids do not tap, and so bus operators could capture that information and do capture some of that information when it's visible that a kid has a badge or wearing a school uniform, and therefore a student. That's captured separately from this particular Key 8. Key 8 is reserved exclusively for purposes of tracking fare evasion, but to the extent, because the district is already paying for Kids Ride Free, any rides that it's not tapped, recorded for students is not included in this number.
So when bus operators, most of this number is calculated from bus operators who hit the button when they see somebody who is not paying a fare, right?
A particular button, yes.
Yes, and they are not hitting the button when it's a student, that same button.
When they make a determination that this is a student, that's correct.
So I'm not sure how you could draw a conclusion then that a big chunk of this is students and this is not actually fare evasion. Would you agree?
That's correct.
Okay. So whether or not it's a problem or not, I agree. I think we need to understand the scale of it better to understand that. But I think we just heard the discussion on rail, particularly where we really have no idea what's happening out there. And again, I think certainly anecdotally, there's a lot of folks who believe that number is a lot higher. And that could be a very big number. So I agree, we need to know more about that. I think the sooner we get that data, the better, because we're entering into a situation where we are running out of money, and we all know that. And we're going to be asking various entities how to fund us and for help. And they're going to be asking us, they already are, okay, but what are you doing to make sure that you're maximizing your revenue? And that's a fair and natural conversation that I think we need to continue to have. Okay. Dr. Lowe, did you have another question?
Yeah, I just wanted to agree with you that we absolutely need to be doing everything that we can to maximize revenue. And I think that there may be opportunities that touch on, aspects of that leverage WMATA's assets in ways that, significantly exceed 1% of WMATA's revenue. And we should have a comprehensive conversation about everything that we can do.
Of course we should. I don't think anyone has said otherwise. Ms. Babers.
Yes, first of all, thank you all for the conversation. And Dennis, I do want to say, since I think a large part of this is due to the District of Columbia's Kids Ride Free program, you're going to have to let Tracy and I know if there's anything you need from the district in terms of, the management of that program to help us get to the bottom of fare evasion as it may or may not relate to the Kids Ride Free program.
Will do. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? If not, with no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Drummer for the Safety and Operations Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Safety and Operations Committee. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. If there are no objections, we'll consider the agenda approved as presented. Are there any objections from committee members? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Next, the approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of our January 13th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll consider the minutes approved. So we have 3 information updates before the committee this morning on a variety of topics. First, the staff will provide its update on the status of the Silver Line Phase 2 project. This includes remaining open issues, activities leading up to declaring operational readiness, progress on hiring and training employees, and the status of the project's safety certification. Our next item will be a progress update on the implementation of Metro's Safety Management System, or SMS, and specifically the development of the safety risk management processes as part of SMS. Finally, the staff will provide an update on Metro's performance, specifically for the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 2022, July through December 2021, with a focus on key performance indicators measuring safety and service reliability. But before I turn the floor over to the staff for their presentations, I understand that Mr. Wiedefeld has an update for us on the 7000 series rail cars. Mr. Wiedefeld?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I just wanted to, again, to keep the board and the public up to date on what is happening with investigation of 7K. We're deep into data analysis and collection with the independent review. It's starting to there's different theories that the research team is exploring, eliminating where they can, things that they can eliminate. I think they're starting to get to the point where this may be the root cause, may be a series of root causes that come together in a unique circumstance to make this, to have some of the issues we've had. So that is what they're pursuing. Again, it's way too early to make any definitive statements on that, but they have not been able to find a particular issue that we could get in there and immediately just, add a quick fix. It does not appear to be that type of solution. Also want to let you know that we are proceeding with what we call automatic wayside inspection systems, which are basically a in-track ability to in effect assess the performance of the trucks. The trucks are where the 2 wheels sit that hold the vehicles up, and basically measure a number of things, not only this back-to-back issue that obviously has had a lot of focus, but the overall condition of the truck, the track, and basically the interrelationship between the wheels and the tracks. And we're doing that. We want to get that into the system. It'll give us live information, but it hopefully will be also, as we start to understand this better, it'll be a tool to bring back the cars sooner. So I just want to let you know that we actually did an emergency procurement to get those lined up and in place. And it's a good tool for us in general. But I think it may be a tool for us to bring the 7Ks back. These are generally not used in urban transportation systems. They're used in Class 1 railroads, the larger railroads, but it shows quite a bit of promise to help us have a better understanding of some of the data that we are seeing. So again, I just wanted to give you as much as we know now, and we'll continue to update the board going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Wiedefeld. So now we'll transition to the Silver Line Phase 2 update.
Quick question on the 7Ks.
Go ahead, Tracy.
Just one quick one. Can I get the timeline on that procurement?
The procurement's already underway.
Fantastic.
So it's literally, we're getting to the point of delivery soon, hopefully.
So delivery is expected in February.
I can't give you the exact date. Let me get back to you on the exact date.
Understood.
Yes,
Supply chains.
Process.
Heard
Well,
soon.
Yep. Joe, do you have a date? Good.
Yeah, I could let you know that we're procurement is to purchase 3 units There's one unit that's already in stock, and we are expecting within 8 weeks of notice to proceed that that would be installed. And then it would be followed by, I believe it was 12 weeks after notice to proceed. And I think it was 18 weeks was the third. So that's what we're kind of looking for at the time. With notice to proceed, the company is going to come. We have identified what we think are suitable 3 sites, but they have to come and verify that the 3 sites are good sites to install. But we think in the next few weeks, work will start to begin.
Because you've already issued the notice to proceed on the first one, the one that was in stock.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr.
thank you. Thank you. Mr. Off?
Yes, good morning, Chair Drummer. Can you see my screen okay?
We can.
All right, good morning, Chair Drummer and members of the committee. Andy Off, EVP of Capital Delivery. Myself, Joe, and Teresa will be providing our monthly update on Silverline Phase 2. As Mr. Drummer noted, we'll follow our same agenda. Looking at status of open issues, we continue to work with MWA and their contractor in the heat tape manufacturer to better understand why that component failed. We don't see it, as a showstopper, but certainly it is something we want to get corrected prior to taking over the system. The bullets underway has been no change since the last report. We're getting close on a lot of these, but still wanted to keep these on here for the purposes of board visibility. Activities leading up to operational readiness date. As we've discussed before, the cooperative agreement definition of operation readiness date is when WMATA believes the project is sufficiently complete to commence pre-revenue service activities. In order to put some qualitative measures around that, we're tracking our punch list, which in total between the 2 packages, 42 and 60% respectively. Full disclosure, our numbers are a little bit off from what MWA reports, and that's primarily because there's a process where they go out and close an item from their perspective, but then our team has to go out and verify that. So sometimes in real time, there's a lag there in tracking, but we are coordinating with them on a daily basis to ensure we're aligned. Operational readiness testing, about 2/3 of the way there, further ahead on the main line and stations than we are on the yard, but we are making progress. So based upon these results, we're certainly not in a position at this point, to project when we may declare ORD, simply because there's just a lot of work that we still need to complete. In the larger picture, we still are in the operational readiness testing phase. The next milestone will be WMATA declaring the operational readiness date, at which time we would commence our pre-revenue service activities. And next, I will be turning it over to Mr. Leader. Joe.
Joe, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. Okay. In terms of hiring, we thought we would be about at 325 at the end of January, but we came in at about 352. So that's a good sign that our hiring process and hiring that third party to assist in gathering candidates is working extremely well. Next slide. This is the typical slide. So the more orange you see, the better we are. So you see we're starting to really close out in certain locations the titles that we need to operate Silverline Phase 2. And I have one more slide. This is a new slide. We wanted to talk a little bit about training. So far to date, we've had 68 classes covering new and updated mainline infrastructure. And this is the areas that are really critical and that reflect the new equipment that is being installed on the main line. So it's really important that we get familiarized with that equipment. Currently, a lot of training is going on in the rail yard because that equipment is going to be unique for the mechanics who will be operating the various hoists, the train washers, and the real boring machines and stuff like that. So that's what we're concentrating on now as we onboard new employees. And that's the end of my update for Silverline Phase 2.
Oh, thank you, Joe. And I will turn it over to Teresa. Ma'am?
Thank you. This slide depicts the relationship between Metro and the Airports Authority with regard to the safety certification process. The entire safety and security certification process is subject to the oversight of the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission. The safety and security certification of the mainline stations and yard are the responsibility of the Airports Authority, with Metro serving in an oversight and assurance function. The certification of Metro's deliverables, the automatic fare collection, arts and transit, and signage and graphics, will continue through operational readiness. Prior to operational readiness, the Airports Authority must provide final documentation for their certification of the mainline station and Dulles Yard. Once Metro receives the documentation and provides our concurrence, it will then be passed on to the WMSC as an interim safety and security verification report. After operational readiness activities are completed, WMATA will provide all completed checklists for the WMATA deliverables and pre-revenue activities for concurrence to the WMSC to place the project into service. A final safety and security verification report will be submitted to the WMSC at that point within the next 60 days. Next slide, please. This slide currently depicts the status of the safety and security certification of both the mainline Package A and the Yard Package B, as well as the remaining Metro assets. Of note, the mainline system integration testing is currently nearly 80% complete, while validation of yard construction specification checklists and system integration testing is in progress at roughly 40% complete. Additional project submittals are being revised by the Airports Authority to address outstanding Metro comments. The resubmittal of these documents will close additional items on these checklists. The automatic fare gate collection and signage and graphics programs are well underway and will continue over the coming months. Next slide, please. For the past 2 years, the Office of Emergency Preparedness has worked with internal and regional partners to plan, conduct, and evaluate a series of 4 discussion-based tabletop exercises. The first 2 exercises focused on stations along the Silver Line Phase 2. The Fire Department response focused tabletop in December of 2020, included discussion of unified command, passenger evacuation, and overall Metro familiarization. The law enforcement response focused tabletop exercise conducted in March of 2021 included discussion of an active threat, evacuation, unified command, and general Metro familiarization. We've also incorporated the Silver Line into 2 additional tabletop exercises in late 2021, one internal and one external. Those 2 exercises focused on an incident in the rail yard. The first was internal to WMATA, and the second was with our regional partners. All of these exercises have provided the Office of Emergency Preparedness the opportunity to strengthen our relationships with Fairfax, Loudoun, and MWA, Fire Police, and Emergency Management. Next slide, please. Planning meetings have been ongoing since 2020, with the most recent meeting being held in January of this year to coordinate planned full-scale exercises. The Office of Emergency Preparedness is working with our internal and regional partners to plan 3 full-scale exercises. The Dulles Airport full-scale exercise will be a law enforcement response-focused exercise concerning an active threat. The mainline station full-scale exercise is intended to be a skill station design for our fire department partners. The benefit of the skill stations is the ability for more personnel to access the roadway and utilize the response equipment, such as WSATs, hot sticks, and e-tech carts. Additionally, incident command discussions will also allow multiple participants to address various scenarios, such as the evacuation of customers. The Dulles Rail Yard full-scale exercise is intended to be a skill station style familiarization exercise with incident command discussions also to allow multiple participants and various scenarios. Lastly, we're also planning for a maintenance-focused tabletop exercise that will include WMATA personnel. These are all required for safety certification, and scenarios will surround coordination along phase 2. Lastly, I'd like to note and express appreciation for the support that we've received from all of the first responders throughout the Silverline Phase 2 territory. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Off.
And sir, and members of the committee, that concludes our briefing pending your questions. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Off, Mr. Leader, and Ms. Impastato. If you have any questions, please use the raise hand function. And we'll begin with Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. Andy, I don't want to belabor a point on what could be a very small issue, but the heat tape, I'm getting questions about it because we flagged it as an unresolved issue, and I don't really feel like I can explain them very well. So what exactly is it that we're trying to, it doesn't sound like anything's changed since the last update. So are we working on it? What's happening?
Yes, sir. Myself and Joe are in the project team are directly engaged with MWA and their contractor. We meet every week. As of last Thursday, we're meeting with them this afternoon, where we're simply pressing them. The manufacturer has been on property, but they have not reported to us in writing, which is our request, precisely what the failure mode was, what the recommended remedy is. So obviously we can have some sense of confidence that, just replacing it, if that is their recommendation, will in fact fix the problem, and it's not a systemic issue that we may see after we take ownership of the property. So really at this point, we're pushing hard on the manufacturer to provide us that feedback. So.
Okay. And then you kind of alluded to, I do feel like the communication and messaging on this overall project has been very, very challenging because we have MWA that's really in charge of it, and then it comes to us. So number one, there was a local Virginia story today that talked about how the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors was going to be voting to accept or start service on the Silver Line, and that was incorrect, and that story is being corrected. So I just want to say that for the public discussion. But there was recently an MWA meeting where one of the members of the project team talked about dates of likely of completion, end of testing, and then service by late spring. So I just want to reiterate or ask you to reiterate that I don't know that we're there yet on the date side of this. Do you want to just comment on from Metro side, kind of what we're looking at?
Yes, sir. We continually, press MWA to understand the content of the cooperative agreement. Contractually, WMATA and WMATA only has the ability to declare what the operational readiness date is. That's not MWA's responsibility nor mission. So I can tell you at the project level, they understand that, but I do agree with you. Things get, kind of twisted around there at times, but those are the facts of who has.
Yeah, I mean, every time they have a meeting and somebody says something, everybody thinks it's doing this. And so, I mean, at this moment, we still wouldn't be able to estimate when we think it's likely that we'll start service, right?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. Mr. Smedberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andy, I'm not sure if you're the one to answer this, or maybe this is a question to Paul or Joe, but I was down in Richmond for a day or two over the past, as many weeks, and it came up on the Hill again yesterday during the congressional hearing. Given the 7000 series, that's still unresolved. I mean, are we going to have enough cars available for service? That question keeps coming up, and I think it would be helpful maybe to have something stated here today. Maybe that's best for Paul. He did, answer that question yesterday, but wanted to just sort of put that out there because that comment or that question does come up often.
Yeah, I understand.
knowing, that we're getting somewhat close potentially.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think even at the state we are today, but I strongly believe we will have more cars just in the legacy fleet by the time this is open. And then the scale of this operation, the scale of this addition in this very large operation is relatively small. I know it's very important, but from an operation perspective, it's relatively small. So we just don't see any issue related to that. So I just don't. I think it's a non-issue, to be frank.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Just wanted to sort of get that on the record so people are aware. And Andy, again, I'm not sure this question is in your wheelhouse, but we haven't heard about the Title VI evaluation and anything on that front there. Conclusions. I know Tom, I believe it was Tom Webster gave us a sort of a summary or an estimate quite a while ago, but we haven't heard anything about that recently. Do we have any further updates or information on that aspect of this project?
Tom, if you're on, if you could give an update.
And the reason I asked Paul is because we're obviously
let us
somewhat safety related, but we're also in the budget process as well. And if we have to, factor that in as we consider 23 and 24, I just sort of am curious where we are with that.
Okay, I'll touch base with Tom right now.
Okay, yeah, we can get back to that later. But okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Mr. Swedberg, thank you. Ms. Martin Proctor. Ms. Martin Proctor, did you have a comment or question? Okay, she may be having technical difficulties. We'll move on. So now we'll transition to the safety management system update from Ms. Impastato.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to confirm that everyone can see the presentation as displayed.
We can see it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. This briefing will review WMATA's safety management system progress with regard to safety risk management, which essentially is the engine that drives our safety management system. Safety risk management combines people, processes, and tools to identify, assess, and mitigate risk before an incident occurs. These efforts are foundational to a proactive safety program and will serve as the backbone of our safety management system. Effective safety risk management can be seen in the ability of every employee to answer 3 questions. What are your top safety risks? What are you doing about them? And is it working? Traditional safety risk management entails extensive probabilistic risk assessment performed by safety and engineering professionals. While this effort is critical and very effective at identifying and managing risks related to design and performance of assets, it leaves gaps in the management of risks that can manifest in operations. The key to effective safety risk management is a holistic approach that includes the active engagement and involvement of frontline workers, the individuals who execute the tasks that are associated with risk exposure. Metro's Safety Risk Management Program is designed to engage and empower frontline employees in identifying and mitigating risks that occur in their day-to-day work. I'll speak in greater detail about the specifics of the process as we progress deeper in the presentation. To review, Metro established our pilot implementation of the safety risk management process in the Rail Operations Control Center, where we built, tested, and refined a number of tools and processes to facilitate and manage risk identification and mitigation. Metro's agency safety plan designates a safety risk coordinator. This individual reports through the departmental chain of command and is responsible for the implementation of the safety risk management process. Safety risk coordinators have a background in project management and strong facilitation skills. The safety risk coordinator works closely with the experts in the safety department throughout the entire safety risk management journey. Once monthly, the safety team leads a meeting with all of the safety risk coordinators at Metro to review the progress of the safety risk management implementation and to review the development and proper use of tools and processes. And lastly, and most importantly, to provide a forum for information and experience sharing. Throughout 2021, while we were building the program with The Rock, the monthly Safety Risk Coordinator Forums served as a platform to solicit feedback and generate interest in the process. We were delighted when Metro's supply chain, warehousing, and logistics team approached the safety department with a request to stand up their safety risk management program next. I'm pleased to report that the baseline implementation of the supply chain, warehousing, and logistics safety risk management efforts have been completed in January of this year. We're continuing to partner with operations to stand up the processes throughout the organization. As more safety risk management programs are brought online, the safety team will serve as integrators, both horizontally and vertically, of the efforts between teams to assure that standards are met, implementations are effective, and issues that cross departments are addressed in a coordinated and integrated fashion. Establishing effective safety risk management programs require investment in people, process, and tools. As we've discussed, a dedicated safety risk coordinator is responsible for the facilitation of the process from within, which assists in establishing trust and buy-in from employees. Safety risk coordinators, local safety committees, and department staff receive formal training and ongoing guidance from the safety department regarding risk management principles and safety concepts. The safety risk coordinator and the safety department partner to conduct structured brainstorming sessions with local safety committees comprised of frontline staff and first-line management to identify and assess risks with an eye toward developing a risk mitigation plan that would include a number of actions to reduce the likelihood and/or the severity of the risk. A number of standard processes have been customized for departments' use, which guides the efforts to assure consistency between departments, but remains flexible to adequately address any of the unique needs of a specific department. Departments use the tools developed and administered by the safety department to record risks and track their status toward mitigation and resolution. These tools include numerous templates for risk evaluation, an online risk submission portal that records risk submittals from any staff member on an ongoing basis and feeds the activity of the local safety committee in assessing and resolving risks. Lastly, we've developed an interactive safety management system dashboard that visualizes the status of the safety risk management process for all staff. The SMS dashboard is available to Metro employees and includes a link to report a safety risk. Each department's safety risk management data is stored in the dashboard and available for detailed inquiries. The dashboard provides staff with the ability to drive down with regard to specific risks and review details of each mitigation action, as well as roll up the overall progress of the risk mitigation plan. The dashboard facilitates ongoing risk mitigation program accountability and enables managers and the safety department to identify areas requiring additional attention or devotion of resources in a timely manner. The dashboard is reviewed regularly with the safety risk coordinators and the safety team. As noted in our safety management system roadmap for 2022, we intend to expand the safety risk management process throughout operations. For the remainder of the year, we've developed an aggressive yet achievable tactical action plan that expands safety risk management to a number of additional departments across all modes of service at Metro. With the lessons learned through the ROC and supply chain, warehousing, and logistics implementations, we're continuing to improve and optimize our implementation, and I look forward to reviewing the status of the implementation at future board sessions. Lastly, we're assuring continuous support for the ongoing activities of the safety risk management programs within the control center and the supply chain, warehousing, and logistics teams, and we'll begin building the process for formal assessment with a target date of 2023. We will focus on ensuring sustainable implementation and continuous improvement. This will enable us to pilot the assessment process as well. This concludes an update on the safety management system implementation, focusing on safety risk management processes. I'm happy to address any questions or comments from the board.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. We really appreciate your focus on coordination, integration, processes, leadership, and workforce visibility. If anyone has any questions, please use the raise hand function. Ms. Lowe.
This is just a comment. I just want to say again how much I love the roadmap and how this takes this super complex evolution of culture and processes and practices at WMATA, and that's been unfolding over a long time and involves these bigger trends in the transit industry and the transportation industry, but it really distills it into what's happening next and how can I tell that we're making progress, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lowe. I don't see any other hands raised. So we'll move to the Metro Performance Report.
Mr. Chairman, this is Paul Wiedefeld, if I may. Yes, just wanted to follow up to the question that the Chairman Spedberg had earlier about the Title VI. Spoke to Tom. We'll be doing a full report on the 24th of February at our next meeting with the Title VI.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Wiedefeld.
Good morning, Chair Drummer, and to all the board members. If I could share my screen and if you could let me know if it is up.
It's up now, but if you could go into click that thing, go into presentation
Yeah,
mode.
I'm trying
that
to.
thing you were just mousing. There you go.
There we go. All right, hold on. Give me one
Oh,
more.
no, wait. Sorry, we see your.
Is that fine?
There we go. Okay.
There we go. Yeah, a setting, somehow I noticed it this morning and I don't know what happened, but a setting has changed on my my Teams. I got to figure it out. But good morning. Today's presentation is on Metro's performance report, and this presentation is going to be given by myself as well as the Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato. Metro provides the board with quarterly reports on performance against targets set for safety and service reliability, key performance indicators, and has publicly reported performance for key operational measures since 2010. This is the report for quarters 1 and 2 of FY 2022, covering the period from July through December of 2021. The KPIs in this report evaluate how well Metro is delivering our mission to provide safe, equitable, reliable, and cost-effective public transit, and how well we are meeting the standards the board has set for safety and service. Many of the measures in our reporting align with the federal government reporting requirements, such as the FTA's National Public Transportation Safety Plan or the Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The remaining measures are the standards in the industry used to evaluate customer experience, such as on-time performance and elevator and escalator reliability. Within Metro, this data is used on an ongoing basis to inform decision-making. Within operations, these measures are actively tracked by staff through a series of stat performance review meetings that encourage data-driven analysis and decision-making. Throughout the presentation, I'll highlight impacts on Metro's performance resulting from the high challenges Metro is facing, including the continued pandemic uncertainty, in addition to the removal of the 7000 series rail cars from the Blue Line derailment on October 12th of 2021. In terms of our FY22 performance targets, this report compares performance results to the targets that we set. Metro updates performance targets annually, reflecting the priorities, investments, and improvements anticipated for the coming year. We communicate these targets with the board annually. For FY22, we shared the targets with the board in early August of 2021. The approach we used follows federal guidance. Uncertainty about the trajectory of the pandemic and its impact on ridership, employee availability, and service levels pose challenges for target setting, but we used the best information available at the time. For example, we assumed ridership gradually returned in line with budget projections. For FY22, we took 3 approaches for setting targets compared to an established baseline. Aim for continuous improvement. Maintain baseline levels or set no target. We factored in performance, previous performance, projected drivers of performance in FY22, as well as industry benchmarking to inform our approach for each target. To continuously improve, Metro set more aggressive targets for FY22 for most safety and service reliability KPIs. In some cases, particularly where performance can be driven by non-preventable events, we aim to maintain historical performance levels. For example, we had a historical low level of serious bus collisions in FY22. As traffic rebounds, we knew that even matching the performance for the past 24 months would have been very challenging. We did not set targets for ridership and crowding due to continued uncertainty surrounding the region's response to the pandemic. Here is our FY22 performance to date. Across the first 2 quarters of FY22, Metro met or exceeded targets for 11 out of 18 key performance indicators highlighted in this report. 2 big things happened this past quarter that affected results. Following the 7000 series rail car derailment on the Blue Line in October, Metro removed all 7K rail cars from service for inspection. These rail cars remain out of service while we continue root cause analysis and acquire technology to measure 7000 series wheel sets. The derailment had a significant effect on several measures, including rail ridership, customer on-time performance, and fleet reliability. On the bus side, Metro introduced a 12 and a 20-minute frequent service network in early September of 2021. These changes meant more frequent service for our Metro bus riders, the majority of which are low income or people of color. We saw increases in bus ridership following these changes. I will share more about these measures throughout the course of this presentation, but at this time, I would like to give the board an update, a COVID update as of February 2nd of 2022. At this time, 93% of Metro staff are fully or partially vaccinated. 98% of our employees are compliant. That means they're vaccinated or they're meeting our testing mandate. As of January 31, Metro has had 3,917 positive COVID cases and returned 97% of these employees back to work. There were 866 positive cases in January, and that was the highest we've ever seen through the last 2 years of the pandemic. 67% of these cases were breakthrough and 33% were unvaccinated. The total number of breakthrough cases since the pandemic is 1,516, and 65% of our employees who are eligible to receive boosters have gotten them. In terms of rail ridership,
Joe, let's just take 1 second. Let's just take 1 second and celebrate that fantastic vaccination rate. Great job, and I rejoice. Fantastic.
Well, thank you. It's been a team effort.
And no lives lost in January. Also, wonderful news.
Thank you. Total ridership for the first half of FY22 was better than our budget forecast and an improvement over FY21, but still below pre-COVID levels. Metro Bus continues to have consistently higher ridership than Metro Rail. 60% of our customer trips are on Metro Bus, and Bus has served over 12 million more riders than Rail so far in FY22. During quarter 2, Metro Bus ridership was bolstered by the return to in-person school and the addition of more frequent service implemented in September, and I will provide more details in the coming slides. The opposite is true for Metro Rail. Ridership fell about 15% in November and December relative to September after frequencies were reduced following the removal of the 7000 series rail cars from service. At this time, I would like to spotlight the Metro Bus frequent service network. Thanks to the board's support, Metro instituted a frequent Metro bus service network in September of 2021, with 20 lines operating every 12 minutes and 16 lines operating every 20 minutes, 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Metro's mission is to provide safe, equitable, reliable, and cost-effective service. One way that we can ensure that we are meeting the equity portion of our mission is to target our service improvements. Based on customer surveys from 2016 and 2018, 4 out of 5 bus riders are people of color, and 1 out of 2 bus riders are low income. And since the pandemic, we have seen these portions go up. More Metro bus riders are persons of color, almost 9 in 10, and more Metro bus and Metro rail riders are low income, 54% on Metro bus and 21% on Metro rail. Our analysis indicates that the changes we made in September improved wait times by an average of 4 minutes for these communities. The ridership impact of the frequent service network is in line with what we expected from our customer research. Frequency drives growth. Our ridership has responded to the added frequency by taking more trips. Ridership grew 29% on the routes that operate most frequently, those were the 12-minute routes, compared to 16% growth on lines with no adjustments. We also found the routes that had the biggest increases in frequency, 20% or more, had the most growth. In terms of our first KPI that I'm going to report out on, Part 1 crimes, the target for crimes aimed to improve 5% over FY21. The crime target was met with just over 6 crimes per million passenger trips, compared to the target of no more than 8. The crime rate fell 33% compared to the same time last year. Part 1 crimes can be categorized as crimes against persons and crimes against property, such as theft, arson, robbery, or burglary. Crimes against property have returned to pre-pandemic levels and are the main reason for the improvement in the crime rate. Crimes against persons remain elevated relative to pre-pandemic rates. On average, there have been 19 crimes against persons per month, the majority on Metro Rail. We have also seen a marked increase in threats and assaults against our frontline employees. And these types of injuries have actually tripled compared to the same period last year. Unfortunately, this trend is in line with what we are seeing regionally and nationally and remains a top concern for our customers and our staff. Our customers consistently tell us that personal safety is important and addressing crime will continue to be a sustained focus for Metro. So here are some of the actions we are taking to address crime. We continue enhancing crime analytics to reduce all types of crimes across the system. We are deploying security observation response team details, which we call SORTs, for increased visibility to harden targets and deter crimes against persons and properties in rail stations. We are enhancing the use of the scanning, analysis, response, and assessment problem-solving process, which is known as SARA, to address crime, disorder, and quality of life issues with the goal of enhancing the safety and travel experiences for our customer and employees. And basically, SARA, there's 3 things. If you can affect the victim, if you can affect the offender, or you can affect the location, you can reduce crime. And that's what we're teaching our officers to do as they're on patrol, to see how they can affect one of the 3 properties that make up a diamond. We are also utilizing the temporary District 3 police station at Largo to deploy officers more efficiently in our Metro service areas known as 5 and 6, which cover portions of Prince George's County and Washington, D.C. And finally, we use the MTPD's Youth Service Unit and the community engagement officers to aid in the efforts of reducing crime and engaging with the community and monitoring crime trends. And at this time, I would like to turn the presentation over to our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Customer injury targets for fiscal year 22 were set to improve 15% over fiscal year 21 performance results. Customer injuries on bus and rail met target so far in FY22, while customer injuries on Metro Access are just shy of target. In fiscal year 22 so far, the main approximately 94% of all injuries to date. Most of these injuries occurred on escalators. About half of bus customer injuries occur due to collisions, with most due to non-preventable accidents, meaning that it's determined that the bus operator couldn't have done anything to prevent the collision from happening. About 40% of injuries were due to slips, trips, and falls, most frequently occurring when the bus was in motion, such as during acceleration, turning, or braking. 2/3 of Metro Access customer injuries are sustained during collisions, all of which were deemed non-preventable. The remaining injuries occurred when customers were boarding or alighting from the vehicles. Actions that Metro has undertaken to address these injury types include continuing to invest in station modernization improvements to reduce hazards that result in slips, trips, and falls. On the bus system, we're advancing procurement of collision avoidance technologies, such as blind spot warning systems and object detection, which is likely to lower the number of falls while the bus is in motion due to hard braking. As the Metro Access fleet incorporates sedans, we are also implementing related training on parking and assisting customers to maximize safety, as the methods differ than those used with vans. Metro Access has also updated their dash cam units, adding behavioral recognition and alerting capabilities, and we continue to engage an occupational therapist to address assistance-related injuries. Next slide, please. Thank you. Metro's employee injury target was set to maintain the baseline average of the previous 2 years. Both rail and bus employee injuries are missing target for fiscal year 22 to date.
Teresa, can I jump in for a sec? Do you see
Sure.
the right slide? Or I'm still on?
I don't. I'm still on the customer injury rate.
Okay, hold on one second.
Thank you for bringing that up, Mr. Leader.
I don't know, it appears my screen has frozen.
Yeah, your mouse is stuck.
Oh.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
Okay, I found a different way to do it. Go ahead,
Thank you.
Teresa.
Both rail and bus employee injuries are missing target for fiscal year 22 to date. There's been a 50% increase in the number of injuries compared to this same period for last year, with over 340 employees injured. More hours on the job can be a risk factor for all types of injuries, but overall, employees are working similar numbers of hours, and the usage of overtime was up compared to last year, as staff are increasingly out for COVID-related illnesses during the Omicron spike. Stress and assault injuries are the most common type of employee injuries, and they tripled compared to the same time last year. Similar to the trends that the nation is seeing and Mr. Leader's spoken about with regard to transportation professionals like airline workers, our frontline staff are increasingly threatened or assaulted by passengers, with 70 incidences of this just this year. Some examples include a station manager walking on the platform who was pepper sprayed, a passenger boarding a bus attempting to stop the operator, a bus operator receiving a splash of a liquid believed to be urine from a customer. In addition, the increase in crime across the region has impacted our staff. Over 30 Metro workers experienced stress-related injuries stemming from witnessing violence adjacent to our stations. Metro has an active employee assistance program to support our staff who've experienced this trauma. In addition, we're actively training all frontline staff on de-escalation techniques. Within operations, Mr. Leader is about to launch a 9-week safety sprint, working with my team focused on recognizing, reporting, and acting on safety risks. While Metro's general manager, alongside one of our bus operators, testified in January on legislation that would add transit operators to the list of professionals for which an assault case can be classified as a felony. So far, this bill has had the hearing, and to date, no action's been taken yet by the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee, but we will continue to advocate for the safety and security of our employees, as well as to advocate for the industry. Next slide, please. The target for National Transit Database bus collisions aims to maintain the baseline average performance of the past 2 years. 2/3 of bus collisions were non-preventable. We're focusing here on serious collisions, which is about 7% of all collisions in fiscal year 22 to date, that Metro reports to the Federal Transit Administration. These incidents have resulted in customer or employee injuries that require immediate medical attention away from the scene, disabling damage to any of the vehicles involved, or combined property damage in excess of $25,000. An increase in the number of vehicles on the road and the number of people riding our buses who could potentially be injured has likely contributed to the increase in the number of reportable collision-related injuries for fiscal year 22 compared to the same period in fiscal year 21. Metro continues to use the data collected from DriveCam and accident investigations to identify risky behavior and coach, train, and improve staffing skills. Targets for rail safety events that were reported to the FTA were set to improve from a 24-month average performance baseline. With regard to rail collisions, there were no reportable rail collisions in the first half of fiscal year 2022. Marking 9 consecutive months without an incident. Staff continue to address causal factors identified from the investigations of the 3 events which occurred in fiscal year 2021, all of which occurred in rail yards. The target for red signal overruns was aggressively set to improve 50% over fiscal year 20 and 21 performance. Metro Rail vehicles overran a red signal 4 times during the first half of 2022, which is on target, and 6 fewer compared to the same time last year. Metro has been working to address the root causes of red signal overruns, namely all human factors. Key activities include training on initiatives, additionally increased frequencies of reviews conducted by managers, as well as independent reviews conducted by the safety department. Next slide, please. The target for fire incidents was set to improve by 18% over the average performance of the past 2 years.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the slides are not advancing. Thank you. Wrong direction. One more.
I'm seeing it on my screen, so I don't know what's happening here, folks. I apologize. Which slide are you actually seeing?
We see reportable safety events, but we've moved on to talking about fire.
Hold on a second.
We want to get to slide 12.
There you go. I apologize.
Boom.
Yeah, and Joe, they're on.
We're there.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there were 23 reportable fires during the first 6 months of fiscal year 22 that just missed target. Over 3/4 are non-electrical fires, such as burning trash or debris. There was a steep increase in non-electrical fires experienced over this time period, 16 compared to 9 during the same time in fiscal year 2021. This is likely related to increases in ridership. And subsequently, we've had a number of decreases in fire events as of late, likely related to decreased ridership. With regard to derailments, there were 2 derailments during the first half of fiscal year 22, both occurring in October. The 2 derailments in fiscal year 22 involved a train containing customers on the main line at Arlington National Cemetery, which led to the removal of the 7000 series train sets from inspections. And the second was a tie remover, a piece of maintenance equipment whose front wheels rode up and over the head of the rail at Deanwood Station while it was performing work. While we had originally set the target of no more than 2, which is a 25% improvement given our historical performance, I'd like to note that clearly no passenger train derailment is ever acceptable. And we're going to be making a change to how we report on this metric moving forward. Going forward, we'll be distinguishing our target between those derailments that more frequently occur with roadway maintenance machines, the equipment that we use to maintain the tracks. This occurs most often because they have both steel wheels and rubber tires and can very easily misalign while performing maintenance. We will create a separate tracking mechanism for reporting on any passenger train derailments to ensure that we are appropriately focusing on events that have serious potential risks.
Well, thank you, Teresa, and I apologize for what was happening with the slides. I'll have to get my laptop looked at. In regards to my trip time in the first half of FY22, Metro Rail customers completed 81% of their trips on time, missing the target of 92%. Rail customer on-time performance saw a deep decrease after the derailment of October 12, 2021, and the subsequent removal of the 7000 series trains from service since October 18th of 2021. Rail on-time performance before the derailment was 91.5%, 0.5% shy of the target. After the derailment, OTP dropped to 71% as customers faced longer wait times due to reduced frequencies. As for Metro Access, this target was held at the FY21 performance level of 90%. Performance was greatly exceeded target. Less traffic, reduced ridership, and ample vehicle resources have led to a strong on-time performance. In terms of Metro bus on-time performance, the bus target for FY22 is 77%, which is a 1 percentage point increase over the average performance of the previous 2 years. Metro Bus has met the target of 77% on-time performance in both Q1 and Q2. In terms of fleet reliability, targets for both bus and rail reliability aim for continuous improvement. The targets were set to improve 5% over the 3-year average. Rail performance is better than target for this year, thanks to a strong performance in Q1 when the 7000 series delivered the bulk of the service. Although critical safety issues have resulted in the fleet being removed from service, it is less prone to brake, door, propulsion, or other failures that occur more commonly in the older legacy fleet. Rail fleet reliability fell in Q2 when Metro's 2000 and 3000 series were used to provide the bulk of the service after the 7000 series was sidelined in mid-October following the derailment. These rail cars are almost 40 years old and are approaching the end of their useful life. In regards to bus MDBF, bus continues to have a strong performance in FY22, performing above target every month so far this year. This success occurred even when Metro drastically increased service this year compared to the pandemic service levels, returning much of the fleet to the road. For the past few years, Metro has been steadily replacing the buses in the clean diesel fleet, which represent about 15% of the total mileage per month, resulting in excellent performance from that fleet this year. The CNG fleet, which represents 30% of the mileage, is also performing strongly. The hybrid fleet is currently the oldest fleet and is performing less well. Once the program to replace clean diesel buses completes this year, the next bus replacement program will focus on the hybrid buses. Metro is also embarking on its transition to the zero-emission fleet by 2045. The first step is to buy 10 40-foot standard length buses with multiple manufacturers to test different bus and charging technologies and assess their performance. And for access, our Metro Access fleet, Metro Access fleet reliability has a strong performance in FY22 at 23,581 miles, exceeding the target of 21,000 miles that was set. Metro Access has sustained high levels of reliability by consistently replacing vans at the end of their useful life. At the end of FY22, 177 vans were introduced into revenue service to replace the aging Ford Transit vans. In FY22, we plan to add another 50 sedans to the fleet. In terms of asset availability, available track follows FTA guidance measuring guideway conditions. It is the percentage of our system under performance restrictions the first Wednesday of every month at 9 a.m. The target reflects Metro's projections for planned and unplanned outages throughout the year. The vast majority of track under restriction, 5% of the 6.3%, was due to planned major capital projects. These are key investments we are making to keep the system in a state of good repair. This includes the Green Line Platform Improvement Project and the recently concluded canopy installation on the Upper Red Line. And finally, our last KPI is our customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction was high on both bus and rail during the first quarter, reflecting low crowding across the system, good all-day frequent service, and strong reliability. Satisfaction in the second quarter satisfaction fell in the second quarter as service frequencies were cut due to the derailment and COVID-related operator shortages. And that is the conclusion of this presentation, and I will open it up for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Joe, and the entire team. If you have any questions, please use the raised hand function. Ms. Babers.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Joe and Teresa, for the report. It's always great hearing about the performance management measures. The question I have is that, as you know, our general manager and our chair of the board were in front of a congressional meeting. And as a result of that meeting, there was a Washington Post article, and I read the comments in the article from whoever the various people were. And several of the people indicated that, well, they were concerned about riding Metro because it's not safe. And clearly, if we go back to slide 8, where you all shared the crime and then you went on to the injury, there is no excessive criminal activity. How do we communicate that to the public?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is we are redirecting the way we police our system, especially on Metro Rail. As I mentioned before, crime has gone down in total numbers, but what we're seeing is a different phenomenon, which is across, what we're seeing regionally as well as nationally, where we're seeing more crime against persons. Although it's still a small number of the crime, it is a lot. It is growing compared to other years, and I think that's giving the perception of to customers that our system is less safe than it was in prior years. So what we're trying to do is get our officers to be more seen on the platforms and on trains, okay, where we're actually seeing the crime. And the more visible they are, I think that will send a message to our customers that it is a safe system. So I think we have to start there. I think our commanders are going out to the communities. We're trying to engage with the community to see what they're seeing in their neighborhoods, because that could be a reflection of what's happening, in our stations as well, because whatever crime is happening in the neighborhood would probably spill over into our system. So we're trying to do a couple of things, redeploy the way we're fighting crime right now, as well as engage with the community.
Okay, great. So I am glad to hear that there is a focus on trying to do more. And, I guess would encourage if there's anything we can do on the public outreach and communication side, I think that would also help a lot.
I appreciate the help.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Babers. Ms. Klein?
Yes, thank you. I'm working on technology issues too. A couple of questions. Thank you so much for this report. It's really helpful. And it's kind of amazing to me that we've only had performance indicators for WMATA for 10 years or so. It just feels like the sort of thing that we should always have. It's just very useful in terms of seeing how the system is performing. The first question that I have is, I really appreciated the fact that with your on-time performance metric for Metro Bus, you broke it down by the frequent, the 12-minute headway portion of the system, 20-minute, and then the rest of the network. Do you have that information available by route? Because sometimes the averages can hide an awful lot of variation.
I believe we do. I just would have to get back to you, but I could make that happen.
Yeah, I think that would be useful information to be included in the report going forward if it's not overly cumbersome to produce, and also could be very informative for planning. And as we're entering into the bus network redesign called for in the bus transformation project, I think it's really helpful to see the actual performance. I'm really looking forward to the day when we don't have to have an asterisk next to every data point that compares to prior years. But that growth in ridership on the frequent network really is consistent, obviously, with what other systems have seen when they've increased frequency, and I think is really something we should pay attention to. It's a great outcome. With regard to the on-time performance, can you remind me what the definition for Metrobus is? How on-time is defined?
It's measured along the route. So there's multiple points along the route that the bus has to meet, and that's how on-time performance is measured for bus.
But I think it's considered on time if it's 2 minutes early or 5 minutes late. Those points.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. What is the comparable metric for Metro Access? Is that also that window of time?
No, I believe it's what we believe the travel time is from point A to point B, but I will get back to you on that.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. This is it's really helpful to understand the details of the metrics in order to really know what's going on. The last thing was I found that the customer satisfaction number was interesting. It didn't actually fall as much as I thought it might in October, given the challenges, and following that. Given the challenges that were experienced. But I was curious what question was asked? Was this a binary, are you satisfied, yes or no? And I looked for the details in the longer report, but I didn't see them. Do you happen to know what data that customer satisfaction number is based on? And if not, you can get back to me.
I would have to, because that really comes out of Lynn Bowersock's area. Okay. And but I will make sure we get back to you. And again,
camera.
Sorry?
I can help Joe.
Okay. Sorry, Lynn, I didn't see you.
That's okay. It's not binary, Director Klein. There's a series of questions that are aggregated then to come up with customer satisfaction scores. What I will say is that when you see the next quarterly report, you'll see a reflection of more of what's going on, particularly on the rail service that shows up in November. As we've seen the survey go forward. So the question, though, it's very important to know that the questions are asked based on the ride that you took in the last 7 days. So we do that so that people don't reflect on, their overall experience, but in this narrow slice of time, we're trying to narrow it down to your experience in this time versus what you might have experienced 6 months ago in order to give a more accurate reflection. I hope that helps.
That does. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Those are all my questions. Thanks a lot for an excellent report.
And I really do believe once we get the 7Ks back in service, and now we have more frequent bus service Monday through Friday, I think we'll start to see the numbers going back up.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Klein. Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. Echoing some of the other comments about the crime issue, because I am concerned about it and its effect on ridership. The part 2 crimes, I mean, there's been a change in the definition between part 1 and 2 in the last couple of years. I spent too much time looking at crime data, but do you have, and those are typically more kind of your nuisance type of crimes. And frankly, those create the perception of safety or lack thereof just as much. So do you have any data on that? Could you provide us with sort of a similar slide on Part 2 crimes and just help us with the definitions of kind of what's covered where in the context of Metro?
Yes, we do. At our Metro Stat meeting, which we hold on a weekly basis, we do track Part 2 crimes. So that's part of the overall. The reason why we've been reporting out only on Part 1 crimes is that's usually what goes into the FBI database. So that's what we normally do. But we could get you the Part 2 stats.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to see if we're seeing changes in the trends there, which would support one narrative one way or the other. So thank you.
Correct. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Letourneau. I don't see any other questions. I do have one comment and one question. My first comment is thank you very much for addressing law enforcement's proactive response to the crime trends that we see. Second, my question deals with the measures we use for miles between failure on buses. Miles between failure. The question I have is failure defined as non-operational, pulled out of service, or is it something else?
No, it's an actual failure of the bus. So the bus could stay in service because it's not a safety defect, but it would be once it's reported and found, it would go against it. Very similar to it's the same standard that we use on our Metro Rail. So it's a defect of the car.
Okay, so it's a deficiency, but not necessarily one that pulls it out of service.
Correct. We also have another metric that we use, which is what we call means distance between delays. Mm-hmm. So that would be a delay in service that would be like a rail car or a bus being taken out of service. But we normally report right now a mean distance between failures.
Okay, yeah. And the reason I ask is in general, when we're measuring operations with equipment like that, non-operational means it's pulled out of service. But if it has a deficiency that can continue to move forward, it's not necessarily measured as a failure. But I get it. And it's a better story than I thought in that case. Thank you so much. I don't see any other hands raised. Therefore, with no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned. And I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Smedberg, who has a request for the board to convene in executive session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But before I do that, I'd like to provide everyone with an update on the GM search. We promised that we would do this at our next public meeting. Last month, the general manager's retirement announcement, the board committed to providing an update today regarding the efforts to launch the GM CEO recruitment process. Based on our input from the board, the executive committee developed a position statement that seeks a world-class leader with the depth of management, operational, and leadership experience to help redefine how Metro continues to be an integral part of the region's transit backbone and economic success. While financial and business acumen are obviously important, we also want to bring in a leader who brings strategic vision, leadership on safety, and a commitment to customer service. Metro will conduct a targeted customer survey in the coming weeks to inform the board's selection process. We will be asking customers to tell us what attributes and issues are most important to them and to help us set priorities for the next top manager. Stakeholder interviews are also underway with union and business leaders, as well as advocates and elected officials. To ensure consideration of people who may come from other sectors and offer different perspectives on transformational leadership of large organizations, we are not limiting the search to candidates with transit experience. This process gives the board an opportunity to hear a variety of perspectives and approaches to tackling the immense challenges ahead. The position statement can be found on Metro's website and social media channels with links to the executive recruiting firm Kaltheimer and Associates that is supporting the board search. The firm has also set up a special email WMATA GM Search at kapartners.com. Again, WMATA GM Search, that's all one, at kapartners.com for inquiries about this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that concludes the update. And now for the request for executive session. In accordance with the bylaws, I, Paul Smedberg, request that the Board of the Directors convene an executive session to discuss the following matters pursuant to Article 2, Paragraph 9, subsections A, budgetary matters that may affect legal positions, WMATA contracts or sensitive relationships with local jurisdictions or the federal government, and C, personnel or labor issues, including discussions of labor contracts and labor negotiations or interviews of candidates for employment, and the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, demotion, or resignation of individuals. And F, safety and security matters where premature release would compromise public safety. And G, disposition of WMATA property or acquisition of real property for WMATA purposes when discussion in public would adversely affect WMATA's negotiating or bargaining position. And H, development of WMATA position or strategy on pending or proposed federal or state legislation. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Babers. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you all for joining us today, and see you in 2 weeks.